John Bacon. Welcome to my first layout, actually. This is Chama Junction, which is not a prototype, but it was inspired by the time that I was lucky enough to spend in northern New Mexico riding the Coombers and Toltec several times. That tourist railroad is really on the same old tracks, using the same old infrastructure as the historic Denver and Rio Grande Western. So that's sort of the spirit that I tried to invoke with this, which is actually my first layout. Like a lot of us, I grew up as a kid with railroad tracks near my house. I was forbidden to go there, of course, and I spent all my time there. But never really had anything other than the usual little bit of track on a 4x8 sheet of plywood as a kid. So when life finally allowed me to start to think about building a layout, I built this layout here. But I did it with my, at the time, 3 grandsons in mind. I now have 4. And so that requirement to give, or the idea to give each of them their own throttle and minimize the number of collisions was what was a big part of the design for the layout. This is constructed on a 1x4 grid, 1/4-inch plywood, and then on top of that is 2-inch foam. I used the 2-inch thickness because I wanted the ability to be able to model little depressions in the ground and ditches and things like that, which I thought were realistic ground features. There's several sections to the layout, of course. We've got a couple of industrial areas. We've got a junction house. We've got maintenance away, a train yard, residential areas, even a coal mine. So the layout provides the opportunity to do both just simple running of trains, but also switching and operations. One of the things that I have done recently is to convert several of my locomotives to dead rail operations, so they carry their own power and they're immune to the track woes that can sometimes plague a layout. But I also have DCC, and so you can interoperate the two. Number 464 is a K27, which actually, of course, ran on the Coombers and Toltec, or rather the DNRGW, and is still in service today in a tourist railroad, I think in Wisconsin. It's fun to watch. The kids love to watch the valve gear motion on particularly that locomotive because it's fun to see. One of the things that every railroad needs, of course, is a maintenance of way section. One of the things I like is a Gunnison plow, which is right here. That's an accurate prototype that was on the DNRGW to try to keep the tracks open during the heavy snowfall in those winters. Then, of course, you've got the usual old beater locomotive and a steam-powered crane that can do the inevitable heavy lifting that's required. Everybody's layout has little details on it that are sometimes sort of a foible. One of the things that my grandsons like the most is that up there on that snow-covered mountain, there's a Yeti that occasionally comes down and terrorizes the village, and they think that's a great feature. One of the unusual features of the layout is that double trestle that the train is going over right now to cross the Animas River. It's a traditional truss wooden structure, but simply for this layout had to be built as a double. The genesis of the layout was actually this little Stearns Heisler over here. I had built a circle for my son many, many years ago in HO scale, and I realized one day that there was a special on this locomotive, and just on a whim, I ordered it, and it came with, and I put in the DCC sound, the Tsunami sound card, and ran it on the tracks, and with the realism and the sound, I was immediately hooked. So that little inexpensive locomotive, which actually isn't prototype on this layout, was what really got me into railroading in the way that I am now. So I'm always grateful to that. All these locomotives had to be able to handle the steep grades that were found in northern New Mexico. Some of them actually even 4%, which is about as steep as you'll find anywhere in railroading. But there are plenty of 4% grades on the DG and RW. In northern New Mexico, you had a combination of different industries ranging from agriculture to mining to oil. So the consists are always mixed, just as you see here. Any train might have agricultural equipment on it, livestock, tank cars, because there was oil in northwestern New Mexico. Could have minerals, certainly coal, potash, and things like that. The Rio Grande actually did have an interconnect with Colorado Southern, and so on this layout you'll see, just as you would have on the real one, a combination of Colorado Southern and D and RGW rolling stock. All of the structures on the layout are hand-built. Some of them are, of course, most of them are built from kits. There's some scratch-built and a lot of kit bashing. I enjoyed the structure modeling. And you've got everything here from little tiny dynamite sheds to industrial warehouses to factories, and then of course the train yard. The maintenance shops are maybe my favorite part, just because in real life I actually am an engineer working for the Southeastern Railway Museum, and I appreciate all the activity and the efforts and the work that go into maintaining rolling stock of any kind. And so I enjoy the maintenance yards with everything from, of course, water towers and sand sheds to maintenance shops, welding, blacksmith. It's all right there and can be pretty busy on an average day. I'm happy to report that my grandchildren do love to come down here and run trains. Oftentimes when they come to visit, one of the first things they say is, Bob Pop, that's what they call me, Bob Pop, can we go downstairs and run trains? And of course, that's a request that I'm always eager to fulfill. Well, I love the whole layout. Possibly the thing I'm the most proud of is the shop and engine yard, just because there's so much activity there. And I'm actually a real engineer working for the Southeastern Railway Museum, and so I appreciate the scale and a degree of activity that it takes to keep any rolling stock going. So there's a lot of detail in this layout. Some of these are scratch built, some of them are kit bashed, and some of them are just kits. But it was a challenge and a fun one to put all of the aspects of a railway shop onto this limited layout. Well, of course, the first challenge for, I think, almost any modeler is to talk to the chief of operations and get the space allocated for the layout. But once we got that done, then we began to build. This is a limited space. I've only got about 23 by 10 feet here, so I had to make the most of it. That's one reason I chose the narrow gauge. This is O scale, but On30 gauge, and that let me have tighter radii on the layout so that I could use the space more effectively. But that was a challenge. If I had to do it over again, I'd probably increase the radius so that I can get bigger rolling stock on the layout. But it was all fun. One of the challenges is that no matter how you plan a layout, you always encounter stuff that either you didn't expect, or as you do it, you see that you want to do things that could improve over what your plan was. So you have to have that sort of dynamic response as you build any layout, I think. I really appreciate your coming to this virtual Piedmont tour. It's been a pleasure for me to share my layout with you, and we look forward to next year getting back to in-person visits as you look at the model layouts in the greater Atlanta area. It's a lot of fun for us, and we hope it's fun for you.